turn down the volume knob on the inner critic. The inner critic loves to remind us of how we screwed up in the past. But for just a moment, imagine that the inner critic actually has a positive intention. It wants to protect you from making the same mistakes. The problem is how loud it screams and how excessively negative it is. Now, imagine that what it's really screaming for is your awareness. Your inner critic is screaming, "Train me, train me." So try this. Imagine that the inner critic shows up and it starts criticizing you. You take a nice deep breath. You bring your awareness to the need for training. And you say to your inner critic, "Wait a minute. What you're saying may have been true in the past, but that was then, and this is now." This has been an essential part of my journey to counter the inner critic with a simple positive message. I call it pause, pivot, take a stand for my future self. Not by ignoring the inner critic or telling it to shut up, but by speaking to it, by giving it guidance, by training it. Knowing that your inner critic is here to protect you, not harm you. So we remind them, you don't have to scream. You don't have to be so loud. I appreciate you. Thank you. That was then, this is now. I appreciate you. See, personal development is mainly about learning how to turn the volume knob down on the critical voice through practice, through voice dialogue. We don't turn it off. We just turn it down. Trying to turn it off is what we do when we reach for vices instead of training it, speaking to it, guiding it, coaching it. Here, try this. Just close your eyes for a moment and imagine you have a volume knob within you. Now imagine, where is your volume knob? Now imagine your hand on your volume knob, your right hand. Now see your hand turning the volume knob down on the inner critic. And now listen to yourself say to your inner critic, "Hey, wait a minute. What you're saying may have been true in the past. Thank you for protecting me. But that was then. This is now." Breathe. This is what it means to be mindful. Hey, let's work this out. What becomes possible when you train your inner critic to lower the volume, to take its volume down to the voice of a whisper? Imagine that. Now listen carefully. Write 25 to 30 words to this direction question. What becomes possible when you train your inner critic to lower the volume to the voice of a whisper? Begin. Good work. Now, if you're like me, or if you're like any person who gets a lot accomplished, have big goals, big dreams, big aspirations, understand that most of it is fueled by the inner critic, the part of you that is saying you're not good enough and you have to prove yourself. So the positive intention of the inner critic is to help you grow and expand, become your fullest potential. The challenge is when the inner critic is out of balance and it starts screaming at you, belittling you, making you feel useless and ineffective and inefficient. That's when we have to stop and say, hey, inner critic, wait a minute. I hear what you're saying, and I know you're here to protect me, and I really appreciate that. But many of the things you're talking about are who I was in the past, but they are not who I am today. That was then. That was then. This is now. This is now. So thank you. Oh, I love that thought. That was then. This is now. I'm Joe Stump, your guide by your side, and this is a 1-minute private work it out. Have an amazing and fascinating day, turning the volume knob down on the inner critic.